Now, I love Scott Pilgrim, despite how much I hate it. And nothing in the franchise more perfectly fits that mantra than the merchandise. We've gotten some of the worst and some of the best stuff to come out of the franchise from here. Like this beautiful plush of Ramona flowers, embroidered perfectly with Scott's face. Now, this video, by the way, we're only going to be talking about the comics here. If you've only seen the movies, go read a book, but subscribe first, do that kind of shit. Starting off with the first, and by 20,000 leagues, the best item, released, the Mezco Scott Pilgrim figure. Other than looking kind of like more Laurel, this guy's basically perfect. It comes with everything you could want in a Scott fig. And just look at the gorgeous cloth goods jacket it comes with. It's perfect, But in the spirit of Scott Pilgrim himself, just when you think it's gonna get great, it falls down. Yeah, this guy didn't get released. This is the Scott we got. So yeah, no jacket, and they switched the colors. So they're terrible. The green, it's just much less iconic than the red and yellow. Anyway, they released two variants of this guy, one with a green shirt and the other with a purple one. 50% of these figures came with an open mouth face, and 50% of them came with a closed mouth face, but it was random. A green one could have an open mouth or a closed mouth, and a purple one could have open or closed. It was just completely random, but seemed to be split 50-50. And then, in 2022, after a 12-year-long Scott Pilgrim drought, where we only saw the dreaded Funko Pops, art toy company ISH revealed two new figures, a Scott and a Ramona. And they're fine. I bought both of them as soon as I could. But they're just a little too refined and cleanly sculpted to fit the art style of the comics. That's why I like the Mezco one so much, even though it looks a bit like Oral. Those rounded edges, those kind of claymation feels, it's what the comics are so ingrained with. It so perfectly fits Scott Pilgrim. And I don't think these new figures with the clean, more polished look, it doesn't look like the comics. It just doesn't fit. Still, this line is much more extensive, featuring many, many, many variants of Ramona. Not so much Scott, but certainly Ramona. And we got three main sets, first being the Finest Hour versions, based on their looks in the final fight scene at the Chaos Theater. And then we got their basic casual clothes, as well as nega variants of both Scott and Ramona. Now here's where it gets actually pretty cool. Exclusive to the web store Bottleneck Gallery, we got the best variant released ever, the Plumtree t-shirt Scott Pilgrim. Yeah, this is flames. This fucking rocks, dude. I love Plumtree. They inspired Scott Pilgrim. They made everything. It perfectly fits to have the logo on this figure. This is the quintessential Scott Pilgrim figure. Despite it being the newer Bottleneck Gallery variant, it doesn't look as good as the old Mezco one, but still, with the Plumtree logo, it just makes it so fucking perfect. And now, we come crashing right back down to reality with the rest of the variants, consisting solely of different color hairstyles for Ramona. No new molds, just different color hair for Ramona. Lame. The final thing I'll talk about today is the miniatures, which were released via Kickstarter in 2021 called Scott Pilgrim Miniatures vs. the World, the first set of which finally gave us figures of the hugely desired Kim Pines, Steven Stills, Knives Chow, Matthew Patel, and his three demon hipster chicks. And they also gave us Scott and Ramona, because you need to have them. Not as exciting, but you do need to have them. And now, after the success of this first set, we saw three more released. The second set released even more highly requested characters like Envy Adams, Todd Ingram, and Lynette. And another set came with Roxy Richter and the Katayanagi twins, as well as both of their robots. And the final set released was a deluxe set, which came with larger figures of Gigaudian and Robot 02, as well as Wallace Wells, Gideon Graves, and yet another Ramona. So yeah, it fucking sucks trying to put together a cohesive collection for Scott Pilgrim. Other than the minis, we've only ever seen figures of Scott and Ramona, but on the other hand, the stuff that we have gotten is pretty good. So yeah, that's it. Just like the other Scott Pilgrim franchise stuff, as a whole, it's pretty mixed bag, with way too fucking much Ramona. But still, I love it, and also, yeah, he's literally me. I'm him. I am Scott. If you're not stupidly obsessed with plastic idols like me, you might think about 2008 as the start of the financial recession. But in my opinion, the far more important recession that was simultaneously occurring was the end of the golden era of action figures. Toy Biz had gone defunct, Marvel Legends was on hiatus, and the beginning of the end for Star Wars 3 3/4 was at hand. But on the other side, a brand new hit series was becoming the most highly praised drama of all time, Breaking Bad. Tied together with the end of every single popular thing getting its own action figure line. Much to my further depression, it was a true miracle that Walter and his gang were able to pull themselves through and onto the shelves. Sadly, as you'll see though, very few of our classic iconic Breaking Bad cast got immortalized in plastic, but you might still be surprised by just how very weird and repulsive these things can get. Surprisingly, one of the biggest lines of collectibles Breaking Bad got was in the form of dolls, and not in the way that normies call action figures dolls, but legitimate plush dolls. And I love these. They have removable clothes, accessories, and they even talk. Like, imagine if Woody from Toy Story was from Breaking Bad, and that's these dolls. Now, the reason I'm choosing to cover these first is because the set's really expansive. And also, the first piece I got was the Heisenberg. When I show you this picture of the entire set, and you're thinking just how excited you are to cuddle Jesse Pinkman as you go to sleep, then it's gonna break your heart when I tell you that only a few of the Walter variants actually made it to full production. Still, this is probably one of the best, if not the best, pieces of Jesse merch ever, even if it never actually got released, weirdly being one of the few to show him in his classic iconic outfit. If you've seen pretty much any of my previous videos, at least in the current Gear 1 Gamer era, then you'll surely recognize the reaction line, because I've talked about these a ton. But these figures are from back in the early days of the line, when Funko was still in charge of distribution, and their dreaded touch is seen all over these figures, as they're quite a bit cheaper than Super 7's modern figures, but they're still serviceable, if a little under-detailed, even for the reaction line. And the character lineup will set a precedent for the upcoming figure lines as well, consisting of Heisenberg, Walter White, Jesse Pinkman, Gus with and without the face, as well as Walter and Jesse in their hazmat suits. Easily the best merchandise ever released for Breaking Bad was the 6-inch scale figures released by Mezco. The figures are all entirely unarticulated despite looking like they should be, but as we've seen, that's fairly typical for this type of figure. Still, they all come with a variety of accessories that are helpful in setting up a good display and add a needed bit of flair to the otherwise static figures. The line came in two different styles of packaging, one on a card back and another with a slipcase. I personally prefer the slipcase just because of how nice they look and how easily they stack. Scott Pilgrim figures by IHS also come in this style, and I've actually kept all the boxes for those as well as the Breaking Bad figures, which I normally don't do. The Mezco line had a lot, and I truly mean a lot of variants, so I'll cover those after I just list the actual different characters they released in the line. And I'll just preface it by saying that the lineup is quite disappointing, consisting only of Walter, Jesse, Saul, and Gus. Only making 4 out of the numerous classic iconic characters really is disappointing, and the Jesse here is definitely the weakest, bearing little resemblance to the character, and that may actually be because there was a cancelled next wave of figures that would have included a much better Jesse. This lost wave was shown off at the same con as the cancelled dolls, but unlike those, however, we never actually saw prototypes, where Mezco simply showed pictures of Mike, Walter in his underwear, and a streetwear Jesse. The cancellation of these figures really is disappointing, especially Mike, adding a good bit of life to the shelf, as Mike would give a good sidekick to Gus or Saul, and also never giving us Jesse in his vastly more iconic look just really leaves a key figure missing from the collection. The first variant I'll cover is definitely the best, and unfortunately the only variant that actually gives us a different and unique mold, and it's Gustavo Fring with half his face blown off. The gore and melted and blown away flesh on this figure is awesome, and it just gives me old McFarlane vibes. You know, let me know if I should cover something like McFarlane's Twisted Fairy Tales or Tortured Souls, because I don't own any of it, but I'd definitely love to do some deep dives into it, because those horrific designs are just so awesome. Anyways, the rest of the variants are simple palette swaps of Jesse and Walt, except for one Saul Goodman giving him a green shirt and red tie. I know, real exciting stuff. The Walter White figure also got a number of variants, with his pilot look, all beige look, blue shirt, as well as a darker colorway, with the box labeled as Heisenberg. These variants are all pretty cool, as I have the Heisenberg figure, but even though it's the exact same mold, I really would like to get my hands on one of the Walter White figures, particularly the green shirt pilot look. All the remaining variants are different colorways of Walt and Jesse in their hazmat gear. These are pretty much the same for each figure, so I'll go over them in sets. Firstly, my favorites are the Vominos Pest suits, as they actually do have just a little bit of added detail in the Vominos Pest logo being plastered on their chest, and the rest just have no added details at all, and are the very definition of color swaps, being hazmat suits in orange, white, and turquoise. As a final note for the Mezco figure line, in similar fashion to the Bowie and Kurt Cobain figures I covered before, there are 3 12-inch Walter White variants, with 2 being his Heisenberg clothes, with the only difference being his pants color, and the shirt being a slightly different color. Now, strangely, the blue shirt version also has an upscaled version, but it has the same black jacket as Heisenberg and is also labeled, for which I can only assume to be money-saving reasons. Overall, the Mezco line had a lot of promise, and I think if it came out just a few years earlier, it wouldn't have been so crushed by Funko's domination over the collectible market. And trust me, when it comes to Breaking Bad, they really did control the market. Like I said, even being in charge of the reaction figures at this point. To finish out this bender of Breaking Bad toys, I'll cover some random, bizarre, and truly ugly and grotesque plastic immortalizations of our favorite rambunctious drug dealers. The definitive poster child for ugly merchandise of any franchise is mystery figures. With few exceptions, these small, cheap loot crates of often poorly stylized figures are nothing worth mentioning, let alone buying. But this set does solve my main complaint of lack of representation for other characters. On the other hand, these are like the irradiated, hate-driven incest children of Funko Pops and Pez dispensers, with the overly detailed and overly sized heads being plopped onto small, disproportionate bodies. But if you're just dying to get a Marie action figure, then here you go. Also, little side note, I find it hella weird that they chose to make Marie over Skylar. For some more ugly stylization, we've got these plush toys of Walt and Jesse. Somehow they still beat Mezco because they actually gave us Walt and Jesse in both hazmat and casual gear, so you can have the duo and not have one missing. These guys also came in smaller sizes as keychains, which also works better than the larger versions, where Jesse's little puppy eyes are just constantly staring me down. And of course, I can't talk about Breaking Bad plushies without mentioning the Pink Bear. As the arguable mascot of the franchise, being one of the largest sources of mystery after its appearance in the cold open for Season 2, there have been a few versions of this released, but I think we all want accuracy here, and in my opinion, the most show-accurate Pink Bear was also released by Mezco, with the U2's version being a far too stylized for what I would want to be a prop replica. Overall, the merch released for Breaking Bad was really indicative of the era of collecting in which it was released in, and which the show came to its rise. Unfortunately, this rise was during what I and most others considered to be the collecting dark ages, when Funko was everywhere and every company was just trying to come up with their own version of Funko Pops to capture success. And unfortunately, a majority of Breaking Bad's merchandise came in this form, with only a few quality and show-accurate figures being released. But unlike most of the stuff I've covered, Breaking Bad certainly hasn't left the public eye, and even with Better Call Saul ending a few years ago, the franchise's popularity has yet to wane, and I think if the right company gets the license, we could see a really solid line of figures that comes out, giving us the classic iconic characters that we all want, like Ted, and of course Huel. Pretty much since its official launch in 2011, you've been able to walk into any toy store and find entire sections dedicated to Minecraft. But what about its sister game Terraria? Well, if you've been around for a while, you may have vague memories of an entire Terraria toy line that's been lost to time. Because shortly after the first large-scale toy line for Minecraft in 2013 by Jazzwares, outside of the LEGO sets that have been released ever since 2012, the game's official release, the same company actually acquired rights to produce Terraria toys. And now, given Terraria's simple art style, even more so than Minecraft, Jazzwares was tasked with bringing the abstract pixel art to 3D. Now, if you guys remember Element Animation, the same guys behind Villager News and fucking tons of other classic iconic YouTube animations, they actually had a Terraria show that was on YouTube, officially licensed and everything. So they actually used the designs from that show for their toy lines. Starting in 2014, which is only a year after Minecraft's toy line, Jazzwares went full force on Terraria, releasing a variety of different types of toys. From action figures to role-playing props, these toys would come out to varying success, with the enemy figures of the line being by far the most desired today, and the only thing I actually own from this line being the Eye of Cthulhu figure. I'll start off with the weird shit that got released during this era, which was the role-playing props that I mentioned, being the True Knight's Edge, which is just the Terraria version of the classic iconic foam diamond sword. So this one's hard plastic, so you could kill kids with it, which is pretty sick. You also got the Paladin's hammer released later on, which is also made of hard plastic, with even more surface area to fucking bonk kids on the playground. Next up are the plushes. The first wave gave us Skeletron, Toxic Sludge, Unicorn, Toxic, and Normal Bunny, as well as an Eye of Cthulhu.
They also released 2 larger electronic plushes of Skeletron Prime, which featured light-up eyes, as well as a second stage Eye of Cthulhu with in-game sounds. And now, the biggest push by Jazzwares was in the action figure realm, launching a full-scale line of 3-inch fully articulated action figures, complete with multi-packs, exclusive, and even playsets. The first wave of figures consisted of Gold Armor, the Witch Doctor, the Pirate, the Goblin Tinkerer, and a Skeleton. They also put out a multi-pack which came with the Guide, Silver Armor, Tim, a Zombie, a Slime, and an Eye of Cthulhu. Subsequent waves would hugely expand the range, giving us arguably the best figures in line, being the Eye of Cthulhu, like I said, the only one I have, and Skeletron. We also got more average figures of the Miner, various armors, and the Dryad. Later they released another multi-pack that came with a Chaos Elemental Raincoat Zombie, an Imp, a Spider, and an Armored Skeleton. Finally, we received 2 play sets, one being the Corruption Biome, with an exclusive Wraith figure, and an Overworld playset, which was like the Death Star of the wave. You know, it was the flagship piece. It was huge, 3 different sectors, mine carts that went all through, and this came with Molten Armor as the exclusive figure. Finally, the last item released during this era was the Mystery Mini Blind Boxes that featured 19 different figures that I'll rattle off now, because there's really nothing to say about these. They're standard minifigures with poor paint application. They follow in Minecraft's footsteps of those minifigures, same company, same everything, you know, just basically the Terraria version. So I'll just rattle those off now. The Wizard, the Goblin Tinkerer, the Merchant, the Traveling Merchant, Steampunker, the Miner, the Cyborg, the Witch Doctor, the Clothier, the Truffle, the Pirate, Tim, Zombie, Skeleton, Arctic Zombie, Pumpkin Armor, Hollowed Armor, and Turtle Armor. And yeah, that's it. That concludes the classic era of Terraria toys. It would be a long time until we saw anything more to release. We did get a few plushes released over this time, although they're, you know, notably of lesser quality. They still put out an Eater of Souls, Eye of Cthulhu, and another Rabbit, but like I said, they're worse. You can still buy those now on the Terraria website, and everything here on out, pretty much, you can still buy on the Terraria website. Now, by 2021, it would seem that the final update had come and gone, and we wouldn't be receiving any more toys, and we'd be resigned to the basic makeshift plushies and U2s that every shitty popular game receives. But randomly, in 2021, a PewDiePie X Terraria figure was revealed. While it wasn't accurate to the game, it was still something, and at least we got Moonlord. You know, kinda. Again, just like the final update, there's always more to come, and we would soon see revealed a full line of mystery mini vinyls, as well as premium figures of Moonlord, no PewDiePie cosplay this time, and another Eye of Cthulhu. The Blind Box series was released via a Kickstarter and had 4 exclusive figures for backers, those being the Dryad, Shadow Armor, Open Mouth Eye, and a Chase Golden Rabbit. The actual Blind Box series was made up of 12 figures, those being Vortex, Solar Flame, Nebula, Stardust, Eye of Cthulhu, Guide, Bunny, Golden Fish, Zombie, Enchanted Sword, Rain Slime, and a Chase Golden Goldfish. These figures are very well, you know, they're shitty. Yeah, it sucks, but pretty much any humanoid figure just looks off. It has the same problem as the Jazzwares figures, but at least those had some nostalgia goggles for the YouTube series. Here it's just ugly designs with nothing to make me like them. But mirroring the Jazzwares line yet again, the monster figures are by far the best and definitely worth getting. Unfortunately, the mystery nature makes buying these pretty premium figures fairly unlikely. Luckily, one more set of Terraria toys has been released in recent years. Sadly, not more figures of the other hella classic iconic bosses, but still something pretty cool. We got every single town slime in the game released as a physical plush. So again, I'll list off a long list of names that most people don't care about. Scrappy, the Squire Slime, Shimmer, the Diva Slime, Swanson, the Elder Slime, Sienna, the Mystic Slime, Scooter, the Cool Slime, Stumble, the Clumsy Slime, Seymour, the Nerdy Slime, Squeezo, the Surly Slime, and the entire Slime Royal Family. All of these plushes are $30 each, so yeah, good luck collecting all of them. And that concludes Terraria's ventures into toys. Despite the brand's continued popularity in recent years, I really don't think we'll ever see a proper toy line the likes of which Minecraft has continually received. The character designs of Terraria just don't lend themselves to toys, and designers have attempted to translate it into a physical 3D figural medium. It completely takes away most of the recognizability of the character, making it pretty forgettable. With the success of the boss figures we've seen throughout all the different lines, say that I think there is something to explore, and there may be a way to make it happen. And if this line continues of the premium boss figures, there might be something to pull me in to collect this, and I really hope they do continue it. So yeah, most of the figures suck ass, but there's like 5 good ones.
I think everyone who grew up in Gen Z remembers Regular Show. Even if you didn't watch TV and grew up in an Amish village, I'm sure you at least saw the classic iconic visage of Rigbone and Mordecai plastered on everything from lunch bags to shitty Hot Topic t-shirts. But one field the park crew never really excelled in was toys. Even the show itself acknowledged this, basing the entire episode on how utterly terrible the original lineup of action figures was. Most people don't ever look past those initial few figures, and in doing so they miss out on a world of pretty hella sweet figures that would be released for the rest of the show's run. And unlike the cartoon, the toys only ever continued to improve, despite them seeing smaller and smaller release windows. Now, before I look at the actually good stuff, we do need to talk about those infamously terrible figure that even J.G. Quintel, the creator himself, loathes. Now, I'm gonna start by taking a pretty controversial side, as I actually think that these figure sculpts are, okay. Well, maybe not Rigby, but Mordecai and Pops look actually pretty nice. And speaking of Pops, this is our only figure we'd ever actually see of him, and he's okay. He's better than Mordecai, who looks a little spacey and lost. And, he can't stand on his own, which Pops does solve by coming with a stand. Now, by far the worst in this set is Rigby. The talking play feature really does ruin the entire line, making Rigby especially look just more like a dummy than an action figure. And that holds true for all the figures, because without the unnecessary clunky play feature of pressing a button to make the mouths move, these figures would probably articulate and scale much more with the other figures we'd see released later. This next set of figures was definitely the most extensive line we'd see for the series, and I'm sad to say that it only consists of Mordecai, Rigby, Benson, and Skips. These figures are in the 3 3/4 to 4, even 5-inch almost scale, and while I definitely prefer 6-inch scale, and we will get to those, these are pretty amazing figures, all being based off of specific episodes, with Mordecai coming with his guitar and fanny pack, Rigby again with his guitar and excellent hat. Skips is definitely my favorite figure released, and he's also the rarest, which sucks because I'd love to pose him in a Wampa cave with Luke Skywalker. But anyways, Skips comes thankfully with a removable Fist of Justice, which let you give him his basic, classic, iconic look, which sadly can't be said for the Benson figure, as he's based off the Season 3 episode Think Positive, meaning he has a red tinge to his color scheme, and while it's not the most inaccurate, it's still not what I would have wanted for the figure. The next set of figures is pretty disappointing to talk about, because they only ended up releasing about half the figures. Now, being scaled pretty closely with the last figures talked about, this set only released characters being Mordecai and Rigby, both with slightly more articulation than the other two, and coming packed with way more accessories, notably including a power glove with Rigby. These are leagues better than the last, solely for the added posability. Otherwise, they're pretty much the same figures. Now, as for the unreleased figures, which are way more exciting, we would have seen a new Skips, who, from what I can tell, is the exact same figure as last time, except he comes with a toolbox and no more fists. And, this is pretty nice, because given Skip's rarity, this re-release would have helped way more people acquire him, and, as for the final figure intended for this line, it was... Mom! Get out! It was the ever-swole Muscle Man. And what a shame this guy wasn't released. I mean, the sculpting alone on this guy is perfect, and he even comes with High Five Ghost as an accessory. Meaning that if these last figures were released, we would have gotten all 7 main park workers, and they would have been pretty much in the same scale too. So it really does suck, because without Muscle Man and the included High Five Ghost, the crew just isn't complete, and any display just wouldn't look right. But that's assuming you'd actually be able to collect them all to display them. And at this point, I don't even have Mordecai or Rigby, so... The final set of action figures we'll be taking a look at today are by 12 parsecs the best, being in my much favored 6-inch or 1/12 scale. The downside to these is that they only ever made Mordecai and Rigby, as well as a San Diego Comic-Con 2012 exclusive variant of Mordecai, who sports a white t-shirt saying SD Comic-Con 2012. So, nothing too exciting, but a cool little exclusive, I guess. The downside to these figures is definitely that you can't display them with the other characters, but given the rarity of Skips and Benson, and the shoddy quality of Pops, you might as well just be sticking with Mordecai and Rigby anyway. And like I said, these are definitely the best incarnations of the duo, with the most articulation and hella nice accessories, especially the baby ducks that come with Rigby, but the power and grilled cheese with Mordecai is pretty nice too. Now, this is where it ends for articulated action figures, but there's a whole host of other minifigures released for the series, and if you thought the talking figures of Mordecai and Rigby were bad, then just take a look at these. These two are released as part of the McDonald's promotion for Cartoon Network, with Mordecai and Rigby being the only two from the regular show. Now, for McDonald's figures, these don't look terrible. Especially Mordecai, he actually looks pretty nice, and on model for once. But oh god, can that not be said for Mordecai. It looks like someone really let himself go, because Mordecai's looking pretty thick in the middle. And you may have noticed a slice on Mordecai as well, and that's to fit these figures' play features, which is being able to swap the top and bottom halves, much like Skylander Swap Force, the best in the series. Moving on to more retail available figures, we got a 7-pack of the entire Park Crew released as small 1-inch figures. And for what they are, they're pretty nice, all having fairly nice paint jobs and a base allowing them to stand, which coincided with these figures was a combo pack of Adventure Time and regular show figures, featuring reposes of Mordecai, Rigby, and Benson, as well as several Adventure Time figures in the same style. Getting back on track with single pack figures, they released 2 episode-specific sets of Mordecai and Rigby based on Cool Bikes, which featured pullback action, and prank collars, which came with some Party Rock Anthem core glasses. Now, later on, based on the episode Really Real Wrestling, 2 finger puppet sets were released, featuring the Mordecai vs. For Armageddon and Rigby vs. The Urge. And I actually really love something about these finger puppets. The aesthetic just really clicks with me, and I don't know why, but the same goes for the old Sesame Street ones and the Bandai Pokemon ones too. Getting back to regular show though, the final item released that I'll be talking about today at least, was the RC Golf Cart that came with sadly but expectedly pre-attached and pre-posed figures of Mordecai, Rigby, and Pops that are actually really nicely sculpted and painted too. The cart also had a speaker that played various sounds and effects from the show, but the remote's range is pretty lackluster, as you know, imagine from a toy like this. Looking at the franchise as a whole, I think the reputation of regular show having terrible merch is, pretty false, and just a result of the first figure's release being completely destroyed to make way for a gimmicky play feature that really only serves to make the toy itself worse. But beyond that, the rest of the regular show toys released are stellar, and even better figures were held back because of what I can only assume to be the lackluster sales for the first series. And I think the reputation is still held, because when I see people talk about regular show merch, it's always about those first few, and people forget about the whole catalog of really accurate and nice action figures released through the show's run. Except the Funko Pops. Those things are fucking disgusting. Every incel needs his femcel. James Sunderland has Maria, Shadow has Rouge, and Chris has Megan. And if any of these franchises embodies the phrase femcel, it's American McGee's Alice. This series and the sequel Alice Madness Returns in particular have quickly become some of my favorite games of all time. In fact, I skipped my high school graduation so I could play this game. So isn't it perfect that there's not one, but 2 incredible figure series, one for each game? Now, I won't waste any time, and I'll say that there's not really any figures that I wish we got that we didn't. Every main character and most of the side characters got figures, with many of the classic iconics getting multiple variants. Alice herself got multiple of the unlockable outfits released as well. They really did make the perfect figures for these games. But there's always a catch, and here it's rarity. I've been seeking these out for a while, and I'm pretty good at tracking stuff down, and I can't even find these. At least not for a good price. I've talked to a few comic book stores owners about them, and even they can't track them down. So these are definite grails for me. First toy line was released from 2000 to 2004 by the defunct toy company Milo's Workshop. Most of the figures here work for either game, with the exception of Alice, who looks far younger and much more like her low poly model from the original. The main figures released in the set were Alice, who came with the Cheshire Cat, the White Rabbit, the Mad Hatter, the Caterpillar, Card Guards, the Jabberwocky, and Tweedledee and Tweedledum. These figures all hella rock, and I'd love to have each and every one of them. Like I said, they all have a very early 3D feel to them, and I personally love that aesthetic. In my opinion, I'd say the Jabberwock is the weakest, simply because of the beast's design, being a fairly standard fire demon Balrog monster. Other than him, Alice can be skipped, if only because I feel the later figure is better, but that's totally up to personal opinion. Finally, for this first set of figures, they released a variety of exclusive palette-swapped variants to stores like the very nostalgic and sadly defunct EB Games. Firstly, there's a few different sets of card guards you could get with varying suits, as well as a version of Alice with some hot black lipstick. I do mean hot. As well as a Cheshire Cat getting a mysterious green glow that was exclusive to Tower Records. A Bloody Alice variant that features the, I'm pretty sure is just normal Cheshire Cat, was exclusive to EB Games, and a black colorway of the White Rabbit was also exclusive to EB Games. One final note for the classic era of Alice is this mini pewter figure of the Cheshire Cat that was released at some point and seems to be a scaled down version of the main Cheshire Cat figure that came with Alice. Quite a while later, at the arguable height of emo culture back in 2011, filled with the arcane essence of Jack Off Jill and I Hate Sex, the long-awaited sequel, Alice Madness Returns, was released, and it lived up and way outblew any expectations set for it. While the original Alice was at its core a fairly simple Quake clone with amazing characters, atmosphere, and story, all that was turned up to 12, with an incredibly unique and fun hack and slash gameplay. The game sadly only sold around 20k copies in its first week on consoles. But surprisingly, Diamond Select would reveal a number of new highly detailed figures based on the brand new and already cult classic game. Starting with this set's version of Alice Little, and I'll just say it's perfect. The only thing I could complain about is wanting the rest of her arsenal, but the weapons they do provide are probably her most iconic. Next up is the Cheshire Cat, and this time he's his own figure and fully articulated. This frail little cat can pose super well, but doesn't come with any accessories, so it would have been cool to throw in some of the snouts or the memories you can find throughout the game. But it's still a great figure. Next up, and the last new character in the wave, is the Card Guard, which has a sick punched clover through his chest with some gnarly viscera detailing in the cross section. The final two figures are more variants of Alice, but these ones are definitely the coolest variants. The first of the variants is Alice in her royal outfit. While definitely not my favorite alt costume, it is probably the most popular, so it makes sense why it was chosen. The next figure is of Alice in her hysteria mode. Now this is probably my favorite. Of all the variants, its siren-esque look is just super freaky and hella appealing to me, in a few ways. These two are great additions to any collection, but where they falter is in the accessories, as they're just the same, and I may be repeating myself, but why couldn't they just have thrown in the umbrella or iPod? And I can't move on without mentioning the lack of a variant showing Alice in her real-world attire, which is definitely my favorite look in the game, aside from the classic iconic. And that's it for traditional action figures from American McGee's take on Alice. But there's a few more straggler items I'd like to bring up before I close out. Firstly, and most interesting to me at least, is the Minimates figure, released as an SDCC exclusive in 2011. I don't own any Minimates, but I appreciate the attempt at an articulated LEGO minifigure type thing. Now, next up is a 9-inch tall statue of Alice from Diamond Select's Femme Fatales line. It's a nice figure, you know, I like it. Not my personal thing, I like articulated stuff, but it's nice. Finally, and the most far removed from my forte of action figure realm, is this official replica of Alice's classic iconic Vorpal blade. This is cool. That's all I have to say about it. It's been well over 10 years since the last Alice game, and I really don't think we'll ever get a new one. At least not anytime soon. While anyone who plays this game instantly falls in love with the gothic steampunk take on Wonderland, just not enough people have actually played it, and until this game can really make its way back through some TikTok trend or whatever, I really think it's unlikely we'll see anything else released. So you'd better get your hands on these while they're at the prices they're at now, which is already a lot, because the cult fandom is only going to grow, and these amazing, amazing figures just continue to increase in value and in scarcity. If any band would be good at ensuring the child slaves producing their plastic idols work as fast as Sonic, it would be Devo, and they clearly have been whipping their child slaves into shape, because they've produced a whole host of toys, from action figures to toothbrushes. Devo really does know how to sell out, and sell out good. I'll start off by talking about the normal stuff. Since Devo are known for their classic iconic costumes they've worn through the different eras, it only made sense that they would eventually receive an action figure. We'd be surprised by just how many different figures they received. The first one we got was all the way back in 2005 by NECA. It's the modern standard of 6 inches, but you might notice that it comes with 5 different heads, and that's because to build the band, you need to buy 5 of the same figure and just swap the heads, similar to the Marvel Legends Stepford Cuckoos. However, NECA would eventually release a 5-pack that came with a body for each head, as well as an autographed poster, and these 5-packs go for like hundreds of dollars nowadays. Each of these figures came with an energy whip as well as a whip. An energy dome as well as a whip. Later on, Super 7 would acquire the license to produce Devo action figures, and they've been routinely adding more to the line ever since. The first figure we got was Mark in his classic iconic Whip It outfit,
followed by Bob 2 in the Satisfaction outfit, same as the NECA figures. Wave 3 would be the most unique of any of the Devo figures, being Gerald Castle in his traditionalist outfits. And finally, the last wave would be Bob 1 from the Girl You Want music video. Now, very quickly, I'll go over what Funko has produced for Devo, because you guys know I don't like them. They've produced 2 Funko Pops, as well as a Funko Soda based on Devo, with a glow-in-the-dark chase. As I always say, with Funko, these are just okay, but there's just much better available, and they're not even that rare, at least the Super 7 figures. From here on out, we'll be covering the weird side of Devo merch. Devo's a weird band, with weird ideas, and that's certainly bled through into the merch. First up is this rubber duck dressed as Mark, complete with an energy dome and whip. You know, there's not much to say here, it's really just a duck. It's a cool duck, it's still just a duck. Continuing with the bathroom theme, Devo has an officially licensed toothbrush. This Tooth Tunes brush was one of a number of singing toothbrushes released in the early 2000s, but this one holds the distinction of being the best, featuring art of the band on the back and playing a version of Whip It called Brush It. I'd love to own this thing, it's just so strange. I really wish more bands got one of these. Like, imagine brushing your teeth listening to Elliott Smith. The final Devo product we'll be covering is definitely the most bizarre. I didn't even know this thing existed until I was pulling up pictures for this video and stumbled across it. This is a McDonald's toy that was officially licensed and produced for Devo. Or so it would seem, because this isn't actually licensed at all. You may have noticed the American Idol branding plastered on this, and that's because this guy called New Wave Nigel was actually part of a Happy Meal toy line made to advertise American Idol. So McDonald's simply took Devo's classic iconic energy dome and style and just ripped it off. Now, this little toy would end up causing Devo to launch an official lawsuit against McDonald's, with Gerard Castle adding, "They didn't ask us anything, plus we don't like McDonald's, we don't like American Idol, so we're doubly offended." Now, I personally love McDonald's, I'm a Grimace-pilled Officer Big Mac Maxer, so, you know, I'd love a Nirvana Happy Meal or something, but I do hate American Idol, so I get where they're coming from. Still though, I'd love to own this, just because of the interesting story behind it. It's just not something you see every day, it's weird, it's ugly, but it's still cool, and that's kind of what Devo is in general. Devo's a weird band, far weirder than most people realize, but nonetheless, they've made so many classic iconic songs that'll ensure they stay in the public eye for years to come, meaning Super 7 will most likely continue to produce figures of the band. Because when McDonald's starts putting you in Happy Meals, you know you've made it. When the 2000s became the 2010s, a lot happened, but arguably the most important was Marvel's resurgence in the mainstream. The incredible success of the MCU at the time, every kid wanted LEGO Marvel, but none of them could get it, until 2012 that is, when LEGO finally acquired the Marvel license. Starting the theme off with 2 exclusive minifigs, one being Bucky Cap and the other being Iron Man, as Toy Fair exclusives, which both now go for well over $1,500. Later, again worth over $1,000 at SDC 2012, was another exclusive figure being our first X-Men figure, which was Jean Grey in her classic iconic Phoenix outfit. Sadly though, by the time LEGO Marvel was actually being produced, the X-Men had been forgotten and relegated to the laughingstock of the superhero genre. With failures like Dark Phoenix and Wolverine Origins releasing around this time, and as a result of this, LEGO weren't too eager to start giving us the merry melody of mutants we all love. Luckily, however, since Wolverine was still arguably in the big 3 of Marvel, LEGO did put out one X-Men set in the first wave. Now, this first set is actually probably the most desired of all of them we're going to talk about today, and it's the Wolverine Chopper Showdown. This set came with 299 pieces and 3 minifigures, which retailed for an affordable $19.99, but that was back in the far-off year of 2012. And if you're wanting to get your hands on it now, you're looking at well over $300. Now, if you're wondering why this set is so hella expensive, then you're overlooking a certain merc with a mouth. Yeah, this is the only way to get a normal Deadpool minifig, which on its own goes for around $200, and accounts for around 2/3 of the entire value of this set. Other than Deadpool though, this set is pretty much obsolete, as both Magneto and Wolverine have cheaper and better versions available nowadays. After this set though, the X-Men would lay dormant for several following waves, receiving no new minifigs or sets at all during this period, until finally in 2014, we saw the X-Men's classic iconic spy plane, the Bluebird, be represented in the X-Men vs. the Sentinel, retailing for $50 and coming packed with 336 pieces as well as 4 exclusive minifigures, if you don't count the Sentinel. While the set certainly leaves a lot to be desired with its simple and pretty inaccurate representation of the Blackbird, it still gives a classic Cyclops, which if you collect Marvel Legends like me, you know how badly people want this guy. Now, the only Black Suit Storm is also in this set, and Wolverine is normal, and a Magneto is based on his 80s Headmaster look, which is pretty cool. It's a pretty underrepresented look. I don't think we have a Marvel Legends of that look yet. Now, the set also comes with a brick-built Sentinel that, thank Iluvatar, came with a printed head and torso, so no sticker troubles here, guys. From this point until 2022, we wouldn't really see any new sets, with the only release being Wolverine vs. Magneto Mighty Micro, which, as you can see, I barely count as a set, and also has no desirable minifigs. The next two items aren't technically X-Men, but they still fall into the realm of mutant matters, so I'll briefly mention that in 2017, we would see another Comic-Con exclusive figure, being Deadpool the Duck, a semi-canonical combination of Deadpool and Howard. Following this trend, another Deadpool variant was released in 2018, being exclusive Sheriff Deadpool. Both of the con pools go for around $1,000, but they're not all that essential for your X-Men team, but they're certainly cool pickups. The long-awaited announcement of X-Men 97 to be releasing in 2024, LEGO finally put some real stock into the X-Men. Starting all the way back with the show's tease in 2022, LEGO would release a Wolverine mech. And this thing sucks. The Wolvie has no leg printing, and why would he even need this mech? The set really shows the absolute worst of modern LEGO and their shitty quality control. Following the mech, X-Men 97 would have 3 featured minifigs in the Marvel CMF, those being Wolverine, Storm, and Beast. Now, these are definitely the best versions of these characters, but all but Beast have other versions available. Also in 2023, LEGO would release a buildable pair of Wolverine claws, which they're just not my thing. They really should have included a Wolverine minifig, but they would have rather saved that for another lackluster X-Jet filled with lazy figures like the leg-printingless Cyclops, another Wolverine. But we would get our very first Rogue and a new Magneto based on his trial look, and the jet itself came with 359 pieces and retailed for a fucking ludicrous $110, which equates to a price per piece of 30 cents each, which is 3 times the agreed upon average number of 10 cents. Pretty much immediately following the X-Jet's release, rumors of the next Marvel modular began to grow, and they were all agreeing on it being the X-Mansion. And finally, just 3 days ago, as of recording, the X-Mansion were to release, and I would buy it. Now, I've not built it as I'm writing this, but the set does come with 393 pieces for a somewhat reasonable $350. The set comes with 10 minifigures, those being Wolverine, Cyclops, with printed legs this time, Rogue, Jean Grey, Magneto, and Storm, as well as for the first time ever, we get Gambit, Professor X, Bishop, and Iceman. Now, while I have my gripes with the figures, like the lack of dual molding on Gambit, or the complete lack of many of the classic iconic X-Men, I mean, you guys forgot Angel, and Nightcrawler, and Colossus? This set really stands as an amazing, iconic X-Men piece. An amazing display piece made even better by the gift with purchase set released as a pre-order bonus, which is a small Cerebro display coming with a unique Xavier as well as a printed tile teasing the release of a future Jubilee minifigure. So that's it. In the over a decade we've had LEGO Marvel sets on shelves for, we've only seen a small handful of mutant minifigs released, and the only one I haven't mentioned is the Firestar that came in the Daily Bugle, which I also have, not to brag. Still, with the X-Men 97 show being released and in the public spotlight, I think it's really hella possible we could see more sets release over the next few years, and hopefully they'll give us at least Angel to complete the first class. Poor Warren. Also, these kinda count, but they suck and I fucking hate them. If you spend any time at all exploring the world of independent music, then you've surely been greeted by this friendly little fellow. If you don't know him by name and have merely seen him on Kurt Cobain's shirt, the character of Jeremiah the Innocent has become a classic iconic symbol of indie music everywhere. And when something becomes so incredibly recognizable, merchandise is bound to follow. Obviously, we have our standard merch released with any popular album. You've got your t-shirts, pins, posters, the usual kin. But for a fairly obscure musician, Daniel Johnston, despite everyone knowing Jeremiah, like I said, most people know him from Kurt Cobain's shirt. Literally, most people know him from a fucking shirt that Kurt Cobain wore, like 30 years ago. 300,000 listeners on Spotify, that's like not a huge amount, but we've seen hella figures come out for such like a fairly obscure album, like piece of work, even though people know it, not a lot of people are going to buy it, right? Not a lot of people have that deep connection with it. But we've seen hella figures come out for it. We've gotten 2 like very good high quality sets come out, both being made fully of just Jeremiah in different colorways, but it's still something. The first of these 2 sets was released in 2007, 24 years after the release of Hi Hello There. The first set of Daniel Johnston figures was released by the art toy company called At Arms. The figure came with a stump for Jeremiah to sit upon, and surprisingly, the figure actually was articulated, with both of his froggy, bugoid eye stalks being made of bendy wire. You could bend them around, have them twist up, do all sorts of cool little bender shit, some cool stuff. It's most of these vinyl statues, they aren't articulated. It's really nice getting something with just a bit of movement. You don't see that much. Even in the amiibo for the Guardian from Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, all the legs on it, I didn't realize when I bought it, but all the legs on the amiibo are actually articulated. So you can bend them around using the same method of bendy wire.
And now this does crack. The rubber around it is generally pretty brittle and will crack with age. But still, it's a nice feature being able to pose it even just a little bit. Now, 4 figures were released in this set, all just being simple colorways. The most common is obviously the classic white version, which had 350 pieces released. And then you've got your supplementary versions being green and yellow with 250 pieces released. Now, also, I didn't know this at first because when you look at this set, you normally only see the first 3 I mentioned, the white, the green, and the yellow. But exclusive to Japan, there was actually a pink variant release, which was limited to 80 pieces, 10 of which came packed with an actual signed Daniel Johnston art card of Jeremiah. The more modern and accessible set of Jeremiahs was released by Clutter in 2022 and featured half the amount of colorways as the previous, with only 2 being featured. The first Jeremiah released by Clutter was the classic iconic white and black colorway, which, much like the previous version of this figure, also came with a stump, except this stump is special. This stump has a vine and a speech bubble that attaches to Jeremiah that says, "Hi, how are you?" Which is, obvious why it would say that. And then a year later, in 2023, Clutter revealed another colorway, this one being a more realistic, frog-like, natural colorway, even though Jeremiah's, he's a space frog. I don't know what color space frogs are. Maybe pink, maybe yellow. That's why the other ones maybe were that. But anyway, this one's green, which is just like a classic iconic frog color. And again, comes with a stump with full color, and this time, instead of the speech bubble saying, "Hi, how are you?" it says hope, which is just, kind of all of Daniel Johnston's messaging, which is just hope. And both these figures also featured a little Easter egg for all the out-of-the-box collectors, like me, which were little doodles on the back of each figure, with the OG white and black Jeremiah features the classic just album art on the back with the date 1983 and Daniel Johnston's signature. But much more interestingly is the sketch of the full color version, which depicts just Jeremiah jumping for joy, slamming "Yippee," which is, real. That's sweet. He's not black-pilled anymore. He's not black-pilled. He's cool now. But, even after 41 years of this album coming out, Jeremiah the Innocent is still by and far the most well-known piece of Daniel Johnston iconography. And, it's probably just because Kurt Cobain wore it on a shirt 30 years ago. But fuck it, I'm still hella fucking thankful that we got figures based on Daniel Johnston, because I know
They will never give us a Will Toledo Fursona figure to display forever perfectly in our jars.